Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk together about the kind of effort we make in Sesshin, complete, balanced effort. And the Roshis have asked that we handle this in part like a discussion. So that's great. I don't have to be an expert on this. And just because I've done many Sesshins does not mean that I'm an expert on how to do it, because everyone's different. Every single time it's different, which is as it's supposed to be, really, because we can't repeat the past and we can't know what's coming in the future, right? So when thinking about complete effort, I was reminded of Suzuki Roshi's quote from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which is that in practice, in Zazen, Zen practice, we should burn ourselves completely like a good fire, leaving only ash. So we should not leave a bunch of messy charcoal around. We shouldn't be a smoky fire. We should burn completely as efficiently as we can. So what does that mean and how do we do it? Partly he's talking about leaving no trace. And I know a lot of us have done a lot of sessions, and it's easy to think that this one's going to be like the last one. That's one of the traces we can leave, is repeating the past. And any of these things that get in the way, I know very well because I've done them all. So I've come into Sesshin thinking it's going to be like the last one and found that that was not the case. Or I've come in thinking, having an expectation of future, which also never plays out, does it? So what Suzuki Roshi's talking about is, in practice, we should leave no trace of the past and no expectation. We should carry no expectation for the future. In the case of this session we're doing together now, this is a little bit tricky because we're doing a partial schedule. So people are staying elsewhere in some cases, going for meals elsewhere. And that means there's a lot of opportunities to step outside of the container of session and allow ourselves to become distracted. And then what that means is that when we come back in, we have to raise all that energy and samadhi again. So the best way is to find a way to keep burning. And this is something I've actually had the opportunity to do a lot, because when I was a student at Naropa Institute, they had no residential retreats. There was no residential setup. So everybody went home during retreats, and I did many retreats there. And I found it's very good practice to not be content to rely on the container of session to hold our practice together. It means that we have to make our own investment in our practice if we want to keep it solid. When we go home to our families, or go home to wherever we're staying, or go elsewhere for a meal. So making the practice our own is actually a really important component of practice. And it's something that can easily fail to happen if we're too reliant, actually, on the container of session. And that goes for residencies too. I can't tell you how many times when I was in residency at Zen Mountain Monastery, where I practiced a lot, my longest residencies, and there would be people who'd been there for 3 years, and I knew them well, and I'd run into them sometime later. I'd say, "How's the practice going?" They'd say, "Oh, I'm not practicing." So this is what happens if we don't have the opportunity to make our practice our own, because they became so reliant on the form, somebody to get them up in the morning, somebody to, a schedule that they kept to get their butts on the cushion, and as a result, they never had that chance to become self-reliant in the practice. So this is part of complete burning. How do we burn ourselves completely up in the practice? Means we don't stop burning because we've gone to dinner, right? Or we don't stop burning because we've stepped out of the schedule. Also, here in Taos, there's a small Zen temple up in the hills, Hakochi, and beautiful place to practice. But again, they've only got limited accommodations for people, and so everybody can't stay there. And to kind of keep a retreat practice together, they allow people to come and go. So very often I've gone for an afternoon or a morning or part of a day. So I've done this style of practice a lot, and I encourage you to really take it on. So what does complete engagement mean? When we're actually sitting, it certainly doesn't mean excessive striving, but it also doesn't mean being completely passive. Sometimes we call this effortless effort. It's a relaxed and yet consistent effort. It's a lot like the effort, it occurs to me, that we make when we're on a journey somewhere, when we're on a trip to someplace we haven't visited before, some foreign country or some vacation spot we've wanted to go to and we're excited about going there. Think of the quality of engagement or effort it takes when we're traveling. And that's not so far from the kind of engagement or effort that we can make in our practice or in a retreat setting like Sesshin. If you're traveling to the Himalayas and you haven't been there before, number one, we're not holding on to the past. Number two, if we could picture what the Himalayas were, then why would we need to go there, right? We're going there because we don't know what they're like, because it's a process of discovery. So one of the things that's beautiful about travel as an adventure is we tend to be really immersed in the moment. And we tend to not be that thrown off by setbacks, because there's always setbacks, right? Our luggage gets lost, we get sick, we get tired, we get jet lag. Nonetheless, we are able to raise our attention, our energy, our engagement despite the setbacks. In fact, we accept that as part of the adventure, don't we? So, in our practice, especially in retreat practice, we face a lot of those same things. We get tired. We might get a headache. I got one this morning. Our bodies might start hurting. We might get achy. All these things would happen if we were on a trip to the Himalayas, wouldn't it? But that wouldn't stop us from being engaged in the journey. So can we find a way in Sesshin to stay interested in the process, engaged in the process? If we're really interested in this adventure, what would it take to not let our interest break? Of course, none of us are perfect. Even on a trip to the Himalayas, if we got sick enough, we probably might get to a moment or two where we think, forget the frickin' Himalayas, I'm sick and I don't care where I am, right? And we may have moments like that in Sesshin. But to me, those moments where we get lost in retreat, it's much like a 12-step program in a way. If we fall off the wagon, what happens? We don't say, screw it, I've fallen off the wagon, forget this. Oh, we catch ourselves and we get back on the wagon, right? In this case, it's the wagon of the present moment, right? It's the wagon of this adventure we've embarked upon. So, our practice is a process of discovery. And if we really engage that interest, what's the interest that brought us in the first place? It's easy to lose sight of that after we've done many, many retreats. I know a lot of us have done many retreats. And maybe after we went back to the Himalayas the 30th time, it wouldn't be as exciting. But I bet we could still find a way. This is a practice I do here in Taos. I'm always telling my university students this. We live in one of the beautiful places on the planet. And how often do we forget how beautiful it is? And we forget to really pay attention to the beauty around us. So I make it a practice. I'm not always successful at this practice, but I make it a practice to try, when I'm out driving somewhere, when I'm out walking, when I'm out working in my yard, to really take in the surroundings, to really look at the mountain. Taos has a big, Taos Mountain looms over the town, and we can see it from all over. From every angle, it looks different. We're famous for our skies here. The skies are often different. The sunsets are remarkable. How often do I stop at a store or something and everybody's hurrying into the store or out of the store, and there's this gorgeous sunset happening and nobody's paying attention. So sometimes we have to re-up our interest. And we have to re-up our interest even though there's setbacks and even though we forget. Forgetting is a natural part of the practice. We all know this, but we sometimes don't appreciate it, that this practice of remembering what we were doing, having forgotten, that's actually an important part of the practice. We're practicing this remembering function of staying present, which is to say, to keep the burning going, right? When we lose sight of the moment, then we're creating a smoky fire. We're not burning completely. So sometimes I think about it as meeting our practice halfway. We have to make some effort to enter practice, especially the first day of session, second day of session maybe. We're making a certain effort to engage, to bring ourselves present and to stay present. But if we're really interested in the practice, if we're really interested in the journey, the adventure, we're really interested in what we are going to see without knowing what that is, perhaps we can find a way to get drawn in, to allow ourselves to be drawn in. So I think of it kind of as meeting the practice halfway. We make the effort to meet the practice, to connect with the practice. But at a certain point, can we allow ourselves to get interested, fascinated enough that we're actually drawn in, just the way we would be drawn into a beautiful new scene that we haven't seen before, right? What tends to draw us in travel is it's new, so we pay better attention. We don't fall asleep in the same way that we do, even if we live in a beautiful area, as many of us do. But we can stop seeing the beauty of it. But the truth is, every moment is fresh. Every moment is new anyway. We just forget to see it that way, right? So, I have some hints about how to do this. And we just have to keep the attitude that a lot of times we feel like we're coming to practice to get something. And that can be a hidden kind of an idea that we don't even quite let into our awareness fully. But it's interesting to read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, because if you haven't read it, you should read it. But that particular style of Zen practice that Suzuki Roshi is advocating is practice without any gaining idea. So again, if we use the analogy of travel, I suppose we could do travel with a gaining idea. We've probably all seen this. We've probably all seen the tour bus show up at the beautiful attraction, the edge of the Grand Canyon, and 50 tourists get out and they snap the picture of the Grand Canyon, they get back into the bus and off they go, right? So they got something. But that's not really the way to have an adventure. That's not really the way to see something fresh, right? So in practice, it's easy to let that gaining idea come in. And it's good to remind ourselves that this is a practice that's a letting go practice. So we actually end up with less than we started with. Less suffering, less ego, fewer problems, less self. So what we're doing is sitting in that burning, which means in the present moment. And sometimes it does feel like it's burning. And this is why our practice takes courage sometimes, to stay with the burning. But that's our business. And there's something to be interested in, even when we're uncomfortable, even when we feel resistance, even when we feel bored. I bet we've all felt bored before in practice. But guess what? If we're feeling bored, we can be pretty sure we've left reality, because boredom is predicated on the notion that there's a better thing we could be doing, right? And that may not be conscious, it may not be in the front of our minds, but if we look carefully, we'll discover that if we really pay attention in the present moment to this feeling that we want to label boredom, guess what? It becomes interesting. Very similarly, if we feel resistant, if we really pay attention to resistance, then we're not resisting it anymore, right? So whatever comes up in our mind and heart, Sesshin's about unifying mind and heart, which means whatever comes up is grist for the mill, it's grist for our practice. If we really take an interest in it, if we really let ourselves, how do we know we're bored? Have we ever asked ourselves that? Isn't that a peculiar question? There's some sort of a feeling that arises in body and mind, and until we label it boredom, we actually don't know what it is. Once we label it boredom, then we think we know what it is. We think there's a better place and time and situation to be in, and therefore the experience that we call boredom deepens, right? But what if we just look at, what is this feeling? What if I don't know what this feeling is that arises in me? So some hints about what helps with this complete burning, this complete immersion. It is an effortless attention. Again, if we go back to our journey through the Himalayas, it doesn't take effort for us to pay attention to what's out the window, right? We're drawn into it, we're fascinated, we're interested, because it seems fresh and new. Well, every moment's fresh and new, isn't it? This is something we know. So some of what helps us in staying with this burning, staying with our moment-to-moment attention, is steadiness of mind. And steadiness of mind is something we can practice even with one round of the breath. If we really pay close attention, is our attention steady around one cycle of the breath? Very, very often it's not. Very, very often it's fluctuating. very, very often it's like a flame beneath a teapot that's going up and down and going off and going back on again. There are two factors of mind that overlap, even though we know that we can't multitask. What multitasking means is shifting our attention between things. That doesn't work, as we probably all know. However, there's another factor of mind that's broader, which we could call awareness. So we can be applying attention, for instance, to our breath. But our awareness function, which is broader, this is the same function that allows us to hit the brakes when we're driving along singing to our favorite song, completely immersed in the song, and a cat runs in the road. We hit the brakes, right? Because our attention's completely on the song, but our awareness, our broader awareness, is still functioning. If we work with this in practice, then one part of our mind can be, the awareness function could be watching. Is our attention continuous? It can also be watching, is that a thought surfacing on the horizon that's going to come in and disrupt my steady attention? Eventually, these factors of mind don't seem like two things. But at first, it's valuable to practice them that way. Can we apply attention to the breath? And can we be watching? Is that attention steady? Is it continuous? Is it breaking off? And where does it break off? There's so many things we could take interest in if we look closely. It takes looking closely. Do we know where our attention tends to drift off? Does it tend to drift off during the in-breath? Does it tend to drift off during the out-breath? Does it tend to drift off between the breaths? I bet there's a place that each of us tend to lose attention, and it's somewhere in the breath. I bet if we pay close attention, we'll discover something interesting about that. If we get interesting, that's the quality of being drawn in that I'm talking about, taking an interest, even getting fascinated. We can even be fascinated by these things, but it takes being willing to apply that close attention. And sometimes that means being willing to stay with the burning, because sometimes it's not comfortable. Sometimes there's a resistance to going there. I don't know about you all, but I have wasted a fair amount of time in session at different times, questioning why we do things certain ways, whether there might be a better way to do something, whether Zen is the best path. There's whether this is the best place to do it, whether this is the best community. And isn't it funny? Because we're probably not thinking that way. Once we're on our trip to the Himalayas, we're probably not thinking, I should have gone to Switzerland, right? But we'll do that to ourselves in Sesshin, right? We'll do it to ourselves in retreat. But how about considering that as long as we're here, how about considering complete immersion? How about just diving in completely? And just putting all that stuff aside. Of course, we're allowed in Zen to question everything. This is one of the reasons I have practiced in this tradition so long. I need to be able to question and find out for myself. But when I'm in retreat practice, I've not found it valuable to be raising those questions while I'm trying to do a session. The time to think about that is afterwards, at a different time. So the practice of Sesshin is about staying with reality. This is something I've said before. That's our practice in Sesshin, is staying with present moment reality, not thinking about the past, not projecting into the future, just staying right on top of the moment. So Suzuki Roshi says one of the things that causes incomplete burning is we have some preconceived idea that leaves traces, that unburned stuff like charcoal or smoke. Or the small mind, which is to say the ego, creates a gaining idea. We're going to get something. It's funny, Zen is so paradoxical. We do get something in a way, but it's by releasing the self and releasing gaining ideas and releasing what we think we're going to get. And the getting is more, like I say, of letting go. Isn't it a relief to let go of the self, of its problems, of its difficulties, of its suffering? Moment to moment, even if we're right in the midst of the burning and it's uncomfortable, it's usually at least bearable, if not interesting, sometimes fascinating to see what's going on when we're in a moment that's uncomfortable. Most of the time, the discomfort's not that bad. Every once in a while, it can be really bad, but what makes it really bad is projecting into the future. How long is this going to go on? Or looking into the past, how long has it been going on, right? We stay right on top of the moment. We don't know how long it's gone on. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know if it's going to get better. We don't know if it's going to get worse. Same thing happens if we have joy or a beautiful experience in our practice, which also happens to all of us, I'm sure. As soon as we try and grasp that and keep it, forget it. The small self has a gaining idea, and away it goes, right? So to burn completely means to stay moment to moment with our experience, whatever it is. Actually, the joyous experiences will tend to last if we don't try and make them last. Isn't that a bitch? Excuse me. But that's just the way it is, Isn't that just the way it is? So this incomplete burning that Suzuki Roshi's talking about it's like a half-burned incense stick, right? Half ash, half unused. It's not a very satisfactory thing, a half-burned incense stick. We want to not be stuck with the ash, that is the burned part, or be fixated on the unburned part, right? We want to stay right on top of the flame. So flames need oxygen, right, to keep burning. So in this case, the oxygen is the oxygen of attention. We give every moment our attention, and that's what keeps everything burning cleanly, right on top of the present, right on top of reality, because the present's the only place reality's happening. Sesshin gives us this marvelous opportunity to just stay with reality. We don't have, at least during the main course of the day, we know what the schedule is. We know what we have to do next. We don't have to think a lot about what came before or what comes later. So the place that the burning tends to stop, that our attention tends to drift, is in any transition. So between meditation periods or even during kinhin, actually this happened all the time. I've done it myself. All these things I've done myself. This is how we learn, right? It's so easy to throw away our samadhi, our concentration during kinhin. We run out, we want to get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea. Well, all that stuff's fine, or go to the bathroom, whatever we do, as long as we keep our attention continuous. But that's not the tendency, is it? The tendency is, now we have a break. I can release my attention. What happens if we don't release our attention during the break? It's actually not hard to keep our attention continuous during kinhin. We just have to remember to do it during walking meditation. It's harder to do when we have a longer break, like a meal break or work period or something like that. But nonetheless, it's possible to keep making that effort to stay present. And at a certain point, one of the beautiful things about retreat practice, Sesshin practice, is if we really stay with it, there tends to come a point where it becomes somewhat self-sustaining. It takes less and less effort to stay attentive, to stay with the practice. even sleeping doesn't have to be a place where we throw away our practice. We can stay with the breath into sleep. If we wake up in the night to go to the bathroom, we can get right on the practice while we're getting up to go to the bathroom. We wake up in the morning, we can get right on the practice again. So that's the thing I was talking about, where it's like falling off the wagon. We tend to continuously fall off the wagon. And the more we fall off the wagon of practice, the more trouble we make for ourselves, because it's always more difficult to get back to it, right? It takes longer and longer to get to that point where there is a point, if we stay continuously with practice. I hope we've all found that. If we haven't, I urge you to find it, where you don't have to make that effort again and again, where it starts to become self-sustaining in a retreat setting. But we also have to be kind to ourselves, right? We're going to fall off the wagon. We're going to forget about practice. We're going to get drawn away. We're going to start thinking about something else and have to bring ourselves back. We're going to get tired and have to firm up our attention. We're going to start to space out and we'll have to bring our attention back. Those are really the things that take us away from practice: thinking, spacing out, falling asleep. Those are the basic hindrances, right? But they're also the basic place where we build our power of concentration, our power to return, our power to come back, our power to keep the burning happening. So we don't beat ourselves up when we find ourselves lost or that we've forgotten what we're doing. We're kind to ourselves and we just bring our attention back, knowing it's part of the process. That's how we build that muscle of coming back again and again. So getting distracted is important. So that should be accepted too as part of practice, as part of the burning, staying with the burning. If we start regretting falling off the practice, we've left reality. So we want to stay with reality as best we can, burn as cleanly as we can. So I'm not an expert on all this. You all have things to share. Many of you have done many retreats before. What are your tips, questions, complaints, issues? Love to hear from the Sangha on this.